Hello there. Welcome to the Strong by Design podcast show. Your host today, Coach Chris Wilson. So glad to have you. Welcome to all of our new listeners who have just found us here in 2023. You've never heard the Strong by Design podcast before, and today is your first listening experience. So we are so encouraged by that. Thank you and welcome to you. A very interesting conversation today. I can't wait to have with our very special guest. For return listeners, we just are so grateful to have you coming back. It's been several years now, so many podcasts, just hundreds and hundreds of great conversations with experts in their field, and I'm just so delighted to have people coming back to the show, and we have a lot of great upcoming episodes right around the corner here this year as we continue to grow and just see record growth, really. 2022 was a marvelous year for the show, and so I expect nothing less this year. If you could do one thing at some point during this conversation, or probably at the end, if you would rate this episode or rate our show or leave a review, I would be so just so grateful for that. I know it takes a moment of your time, but it really does a lot for us, for our show. And honestly, I really want to see the feedback. I love a sentence or two about your feelings about our podcast or about a particular episode or guest. Would just love to hear from you, or just smash 5 stars real quick. Anything like that really helps, whatever platform you listen. Thank you so much for that. So, our guest today, the one and only Gillis Pellegrin. He is a functional nutritionist, and we got to know each other a little bit better a little over a month ago when we had a nice conversation just to kind of drill down what we're going to talk about today, because he can really go in a lot of different directions with his background. He works with a past guest on the show, William Grazione, the educated dieter, who's a close friend of ours, a terrific man, and Gillis works with Will, and he's like one of his right-hand man, you know, and I remember Will saying, I don't know, probably a year ago or more, that he, you know, that this guy would be a great guest for you guys, you know, and then, you know, I just dragged my feet on that one. So, but I'm glad it finally worked out. So Gillis, so grateful to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for making time for us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Chris. You know, it's a pleasure to be here, and it's nice that, you know, over that last year ago, take no offense to dragging the feet, man. It's come back around. We're here now, and
that's right.
Everything happens in due time at the right time, right?
That's right. Exactly right. No doubt about it. Yeah, I think it was actually almost 1 year to the day that Will's episode, because it went live right in the beginning of 2022, and Mike and I recorded a terrific episode with him about really about kind of repairing your broken metabolism and stuff, and it was just, you know, very, very William Grazione type conversation.
Absolutely.
Half of it went over my head. He had to dumb down a lot of the brilliant stuff that he was saying, but no, it was fantastic, and that episode in particular performed extremely well for us for the year. And so I think soon after that, you know, he was like, yeah, you definitely should get some of my team on there, you know, because we can talk about all things nutrition. And honestly, this is an area I think so many people struggle in, you know, for various reasons. But before we get to really the meat of and the potatoes of today's conversation, Gillis, would you please share with our guests a little bit about what you do and your background and what really sparked that interest?
Yeah, so my background is in the functional nutrition space. You know, what kind of got me really passionate about like diving into these more complex things that we're seeing in a lot of people's health is, you know, I've dealt with my own share of health issues. And honestly, there's a lot of people that are really, really good coaches out there that have actually gotten into the space for their own health issues, as being inspired to, like, we want to make sure other people don't go through the same things we've endured in health, right? And so that's come from a very deep-rooted problem for me just growing up with my family, right? I came from a family that had terrible habits, terrible health issues. And even as a young child, Chris, I've always just been that person that I've kind of wanted to kind of create a separate path because I didn't want to become that, right? I was the youngest of three siblings and watched a mother, father that were had the, my father worked in the oil field, right? So very far from what I do. And so seeing that type of stuff coming from South Louisiana, it was just one of those things that I'm like, I'm not quite sure that that's the route that I want to take in life, seeing what that kind of ends up being later in life. And so fast forwarding, I've kind of wore so many different hats in life, I should say, and that could be various podcasts, but we'll keep it concise here. But that's what essentially has got me into the functional space of nutrition, is because for me, where I've always really seen myself is, what about the people that are really struggling with the health versus the people that are relatively thriving in life, right? I've always kind of worried about, or wondered about, not really, I wouldn't use worry is not the right term, but wondered about those people that are maybe feeling broken, if you will, right? Like, we all start off with a blank canvas in life, right? How we write that on that canvas is what dictates the path we take. So at one place along the line of life, what happened in that canvas for them to feel quote unquote broken, right? And so that's always been my way of thinking. And so that's really kind of what kind of pushed me into that area of functional nutrition and bridging the gap on what is going on with both type of people, right? People that are really thriving in life and people that are really no different, but maybe had a little bit more of a struggle in life.
Isn't that something too? We have so much in common. I'm the youngest of three boys, and I didn't want to necessarily become what I saw in my father, but it was kind of not for his successes, but more for the bad habits that he had. And I know William had a lot of the same. I'm sure you guys have had that conversation. He had a lot of that kind of, obesity and stuff in his life. He didn't want that for himself. And so I think that really is a great driver in people in their success long term, is what are they coming from, and that credibility and that authenticity, that life experience that really kind of pushes them into something that they just have, almost just like this this internal drive to really go after something 100% because they really don't want to fall back into
Absolutely.
what they came from.
Yeah, and I think our purpose and passion in what we do is really what drives us, right? It drives us in terms of what is that internal cue in us that really kind of backs the why of what we're doing, right? Everybody has their why, but what backs that, like in terms that keeps us driven to be able to really kind of say, okay, because we know in the nutrition industry, in the functional space, our audience here can have so many different complexities in terms of, well, what is the right thing I should pursue to optimize my health? Everything is thrown in people's faces in terms of what's the quote unquote right dietary protocol or program, and it becomes very overwhelming for the consumer. So what we do as an industry is we make the right move in terms of like, well, let's think about this, let's educate you so that way you can really pick up if this is something that's true, genuinely going to help you, or is it just a cute thing, an immediate thing that really makes you very intrigued and interested, and what is that going to actually leave you long term? What we do is not fancy. It's not very glamorous and shiny, right?
Yeah,
it's about
right.
the work. It's about creating structure, and it's about creating longevity in what we're doing.
Yeah, and diffusing a lot of the confusion and the noise that's out there, in the health space, and more specifically, like nutritional side of things. Gosh, I mean, the last 50 years, if you looked at like what was considered healthy, right, and the food pyramid and all that, I mean, people just don't know. People, let's say someone around my age, into their 50s. I'm in my later 40s. Like we grew up with 6 to 8 or 8 to 10 servings of bread every day. Like this.
Yep.
That's kind of the main sort. There was a lot of bad information out there.
Absolutely.
Really, that was just all about big business. In what was getting promoted and what was getting deemed the healthiest choices out there.
Absolutely.
And it's almost completely been flipped upside down, which is so funny. Why is it that people, I don't know, when you really think about it, people know so much more about a lot of areas of their life than they do their own health, their own personal health and well-being. And they put more effort and energy into these other things, learning trades, learning how things work, mechanical things, right? But know very little about their own systems and having the pulse of what's really going on inside their own body with regular checkups, physicals, getting blood work done, things like that. What are your thoughts on that in terms of people becoming a little bit more proactive? Here's a new year, right? What's one thing or two things that people can start to do to start to take a little bit more ownership and care for their health, their body?
Yeah, that ownership has to come from a perspective shift, right? And you have to treat your internal health, your physical health, just as important as you see something that is completely non-negotiable in other aspects of life, right? If you have a son, a daughter, you're going to do your absolute everything to make sure that child is taken care of. There is no negotiating that. So that same level of care that you have for that other life, that other person, and want the best for them, that perspective has to be shifted to you too. Because if you're truly, really, really trying to provide that optimal life, providing something, the absolute giving it your all, well, guess what? Part of giving it your all is giving it your all to yourself, because the most important part in that child's life is actually you. Okay. And so it's a perspective shift that needs to be had to be taking it as seriously as you would something to that level of importance to your life. Does that make sense?
Makes perfect sense. Like and I've used this in the past. I don't know what conversation, but when you're on an airplane and they're giving you the briefing on safety measures, if something was to happen on the airplane and the masks drop down, what do they say? Put the mask on yourself first, and then whoever you're with, how can you help them, right? Because we're no good to other people if we're not good to ourselves first. And it's not being selfish. It's really, it goes beyond that. It's a selfless act actually to take really good care of yourself in order to be there and be your best for others.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's just that perspective shift, it's seeing, because it's easy. Our natural human nature is to feel like you're being selfish when you're doing things for, especially if you're a parent.
Right.
If that's the first, your body's natural, your human instinct is to say, I have to take care of other people before I take care of me. But you're right. That's such a very great analogy. It's like if you're in a plane and things become, in order for you to help your neighbor, you have to put your own mask on first so that way you can help them. It's no different than any other aspect of life and in health, right? So it's changing that perspective, that pendulum, and really having people really take that ownership and responsibility for themselves before they can continue moving forward to help others, right? It's no different for us as coaches, right?
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. So what's a suggestion that you have that and I love to go to what's a simple thing that people can do where they can learn a lot about their own health. And so my mind always goes to well, what's your blood say, right? In terms of you could go donate blood, which has so many benefits to you personally, but also it helps other people. But in just donating blood, you learn a little bit about your own health and well-being, and just in a donation. Because you get numbers back. They give you information about what you just gave them. What's the quality of this person's blood? So let's just start to dive into that a little bit. Like, what would you say to somebody who's like a little bit timid or doesn't have any experience or is a little bit fearful of something like that? Everyone sees the big red bus going around.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
They're everywhere. Yeah. And there's donation locations all over the place wherever people live. What suggestions would you make there for people?
Yeah, so I'm going to dive into this, Chris, because I think this is super important. I'm going to be I want people to understand this. And so think of it this way, right? When you are working for a company, and maybe within that company you have maybe your annual physical coming up for your health insurance, right? So that part of that annual physical is going to your primary care doctor, getting blood work done, and then you wait another 12 months and you repeat that cycle, okay? So that is more standard protocol because you have to in order to keep your insurance, up to par. But there are some unfortunate times that things are caught that are actually life-threatening in those types of annual physicals. I have a close friend of mine that did exactly that, and it was just a perfect timing thing for him that he was end up being diagnosed with a leukemia. They caught on a standard physical, okay, ended up being diagnosed with a cancer, a blood-borne cancer, and his daughter is 4 years old, just bought land. He owns a company, a construction company, and if he had not gotten that physical, it's just as part of his health insurance, he wouldn't have known. But if we saw this, let's think about this a little more, right? So let's think about if you didn't wait to do this. You didn't wait in order to just for the sake of keeping health insurance, and you were proactive of taking your own awareness, empower yourself to say, you know what, I'm going to go and I'm going to get blood work. Maybe once every 6 months. Maybe I'll get it with my annual physical, but maybe I'm going to prioritize for 6 months, maybe something more comprehensive on my own. If I don't know what I'm looking at, there's always help out there that someone can help you to kind of understand that. That's part of what I do and what we do with the Educated Dieter is we kind of help to understand that. We're not really overturning and saying that we're a physician or replacing a physician, but we're really here to educate, to empower you. And hey, look, if there's something that is beyond the scope of what we do, we're going to say, hey, look, this is maybe a concern that you might want to bring up to your doctor. But if you, the consumer, took that level of initiation of doing it on your own, don't wait, because you may not be as lucky as what my friend was, right? You know what I mean? And so that's where I'm so passionate about this stuff, is just taking that level of incentive to yourself and doing these things, even if you don't really know. Maybe it's an uncomfortable thing, right? Take a step back. It's only once a year. And if it's something, don't feel like you are like, well, this can't happen to me.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because more and more these days, it's happening to a lot more people.
That's right. And it's not necessarily an age thing, because I think a lot of times we take our health for granted all the way, through our 20s, I would say.
Yeah.
And I would say you get a gut check maybe at some point in your 30s, especially once you become a parent, if that happens. And I say that because you just start looking at life a little different once you are
real responsibilities.
With a child. Yeah, things change. Your perspective shifts without question. And that's where you should really start contemplating, I got to take some ownership here. I got to, walk more. I got to, stop snacking late at night. I got to, get up earlier and be more active and do so many workouts a week and things like that. I need to clean up my diet. I think a lot of these things, people have these thoughts. These aren't unique to me. These are just normal, everyday thoughts. But it's the action taken that really matters, that changes things. Like you said, call up and make an appointment. Go get a physical. Who cares? You're going to be uncomfortable. You're going to sit on a cold table. Someone's going to touch you where you don't want to be touched. But listen, it's over so quickly, and that's what the big point I think I want to make too about this. Something as simple as a physical. A lot of times it's part of your insurance. It's covered. Maybe you're just paying a small deductible of some kind. But you can learn so much for a very brief moment of being uncomfortable. But that's what these people do for a living. So whatever things that you feel about yourself physically, like, you're uncomfortable, like somebody seeing you with your shirt off or touching you. It's like, that's what they do. Your body's not any different than any other body they see.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, like, get over yourself, and
Yep.
who cares? That you're in a gown that they can see your butt. It's like, whatever, dude.
Yeah.
Like, it's more important, like what your friend did, is that something was discovered that would have been catastrophic had they not maybe caught it early. And how is he doing today? Is he doing okay?
Yeah, he's doing better. He's overcome it. They caught it in a very early stage. And,
Wow.
I mean, he's 40 years old, so he's not old. He's not,
Right.
He's got his whole life ahead of him, and, he overcame it. But he's very strong-willed and strong-minded when he puts his mind to things. But it's something that's opened his eyes, because he was one of those people we're talking about today of like, well, let me do my annual physical, and they just happen to catch it. So
Right.
not everybody is that lucky to happen to catch it in a place where it's not, say, curable, but it's so far in depth into the severity of that level of cancer that now you're terminal, and so
But he technically wasn't symptomatic in other ways
Nothing.
that were apparent to him. So without someone analyzing, looking at his numbers, his blood markers and stuff, they saw unusual activity, or things were high that shouldn't be high, and things were low that, and so I want to get into that a little bit, is having a consultation with somebody after this. So you go and you get work done, and maybe you just go to a clinic rather than like getting a physical. Maybe you just go somewhere where they draw blood and it goes to a LabCorp or something like that, right? And then it's like, well, what do I do with that now? Well, there's a lot of places out there that you can have an over the phone consultation where they're reviewing your blood panel with you. Share a little bit of information about maybe, like, what are some of the things for men or women? We can focus on both, or touch on both, because I want this to be helpful to men and to women, this conversation. But what are some of the things that really our blood is going to tell us? Like, it's just like an expert's kind of like overview of a 3-page packet, a 4-page packet of paper. What are they learning about you in terms of things that are high or low or just right?
Yeah, so like it depends on the in-depthness of the blood work. So like if you're going through a standard physical, they're generally giving you just like your normal blood, red blood cell count, white blood cell count, those types of things, right? If you're looking at something a little bit further in depth that might be dealing with, maybe you're struggling to lose weight, maybe you're feeling sluggish and you're very tired all the time. And so in that case, it's good to get something such as like thyroid panels done, right? Your thyroid, a really huge part of your metabolism and your ability to either lose weight or even sustain weight loss for those that are out there trying to lose weight, right? We don't have a problem as a society of losing weight. We have a problem with our society keeping it off.
That's right.
Okay. There's a reason why there's that vicious cycle. So we want to break that cycle. And by understanding some of those things, by getting something like a thyroid panel or even a sex hormone panel where you're checking testosterone, right? You're checking all of these other things, right? And so, because those things are really going to be the root cause of how we feel. Right? It's great to look lean and feel great look great in your skin. But if you don't feel great in your skin and you can't function and you're showing up to work and you can't think, you got all these brain fog, like, I mean, unless you're in a fitness industry where your body is really the reason that's keeping things driven, but for most of us, that's not always the case, right? So we need to be able to have our minds optimal just as much as we have our bodies. And so things like testosterone and thyroid, all of those are really important, lab markers that are going to really help us feel good internally, just as much as it's going to display the external, side of things as well.
Yeah,
okay.
No, it is. It's so much of it too. It's not about always just the physical appearance. It's about the way we feel, the way we think, our energy, right? So cognitive and energy and things. And I was noticing this in myself. I don't know if it was about 10 years ago. or so. I had, a young baby at the time. My son was only like, a couple years old. And I was hitting a wall, like midday. I just felt very like run down and tired, like 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And I did start to go, and I was, at the time, I would have been in my mid 30s. So I'm like, I'm in pretty good shape. Like what, but let me go and, let me take some ownership here. Let me go get some blood work done. And sure enough, my testosterone was very low. For a 35-year-old man, it was like 300 or something, or it was on the cusp of basically being out of like what's considered a healthy range. And so I didn't go to like TRT or anything because I feel like that's, if it's needed, it shouldn't be the very first thing that you go to. There's other things. So there was some things in my lifestyle I cleaned up. I know I started taking a DHEA, and there were some other things I was doing, and I ended up doubling from where I was.
Yeah,
now I haven't gotten it tested now in about a year and a half, so I'm actually kind of anxious to go back.
See what
there
that
was
looks
like
like.
a 6-year stretch where I was getting tested every 6 months, and it was staying at a pretty good level. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to take a break. But I feel like I want to get back to at least getting an annual check on it. But will you talk a little bit about that impact of like low T or estrogen in women being out of whack, and really the implications of that?
Yeah, for like testosterone being low, it definitely plays a large part of our quality of life as males and for women, to be honest with you, right? Yeah, and so testosterone for males, if whether you're doing things naturally, maybe you're not at that place in age that where, like you said, HRT should be the last resort, right? Not the first resort, right? And so once you get to that point, if you are really kind of crossing that and say, hey, look, I am at that age that maybe testosterone is going to improve my quality of life, and maybe that's the leap that I want to take. Maybe you are at that last resort. You have to really be careful with that and who you're actually confining in, right? Because testosterone can go different places, and that's dangerous for males too, right? And so you have to make sure you're getting consistent care, follow-ups when you do take that leap. You can't just get on testosterone and say, okay, well, everything's going to be great, right? There's a lot of intricacies that you have to have follow-up work. You have to make sure that things are remaining optimal and that it's not converting to something else that's making your situation worse. Because testosterone converts to estrogen too, and so if they're only put on testosterone, and the reason I'm saying this, Chris, is because I see it a lot, is where males will get put on testosterone, and when I ask the questions, and I'm asking some of these consulting questions, like, okay, well, where's your estrogen? They're like, I've never checked my estrogen. I have no idea. And I'm like, okay, well, you're telling me that testosterone really hasn't been very beneficial for you, and so at this case, you got to look at some of these things to connect the dots to say, look, you may be taking a therapeutic exogenous hormone that might be exacerbating your problems because you're converting to estrogen more than it's actually being therapeutically helpful for you, right? And so that's the problem we run into males. For women, when it comes to estrogen, it depends on the age dependency, right? So let's talk about a woman that's still getting a normal, regular menstrual cycle, okay? In that case, they're more prone to elevated estrogen than it is low, because for us as males, testosterone is a dominant sex hormone, but on the pendulum on the other side for the females, estrogen is the more dominant. And so, but where it gets a little bit more complex for women is that monthly cycle has a constant shift in hormonal values, okay? And so with that, you have to make sure estrogen is balanced to another hormone called progesterone, okay? So those things have to be somewhat in balance, okay? But estrogen is the dominant sex hormone, and there's 3 components where estrogen comes from, right? So when they have a monthly menstrual cycle, for the women's reproductive health, it's predominantly coming from their ovaries. Okay, but at the same time, the body becomes very efficient on storing estrogen, the more adipose you have, the more body fat you have, because estrogen is stored in adipose tissue or in body fat, right? So it's important to make sure, that's why it's important to have a good healthy body composition. Now, there's a lot of genetic, components to this too. Because if you look at a woman, and let's say you're looking at a woman, you maybe don't even have labs on her, right? Maybe you haven't really had the opportunity to get blood work for whatever the case may be. But if you can look visually and see where they're carrying predominantly most of their weight, well, for a woman, estrogen has receptors, okay? So meaning the body has all these little small receptors where these things tag to. Think of it as like a magnet. The estrogen is that, and you have the magnets or the receptors, okay? Well, if you could see that most of the weight that's being carried is like around the hips and buttocks, that's because for women, that's predominantly where those estrogen receptors are, okay? So it's a good indicator, like, okay, well, this could be, and then you can ask the probing questions, right? If they're dealing with all sorts of fatigue, brain fog, their menstrual cycles is irregular or severe, okay? All of those components can really kind of lead you to at least somewhat of a clue in saying, okay, this person likely has some form of hormonal imbalance where estrogen is so high, it's causing further stress on the body. And then if you're not careful, and I'm going to connect the dot here, Chris. So if you're not careful and you leave that unassisted to balance that component out, estrogen becomes to be so high where it elevates cortisol, the stress hormone, okay? And then that starts impacting the way thyroid functions. Okay, if you look at statistically in the country or even globally, it's for 1 out of every 5 women develop hypothyroid, suboptimal thyroid, where they struggle with their weight. 1 out of every 5. Okay, and so it's a very, very common thing. But if you look at the statistics in the medical community, thyroid medication is the one that is oftentimes where people are overdosed on that medication. So that's the biggest problem. So instead of saying, hey, look, this person has hypothyroidism, well, let's look at what caused the hypothyroidism, right? Because if we can fix the deep-rooted issues and fix things, then you don't need to be dependent on medication. If we can fix this thing in the deeper-rooted cause that caused us in the first place, and that is what gives you longevity of fixing things going forward.
Right. And that's where a lot of the confusion, I guess you could say, for me, or just not being highly educated in, I'm not going to be able to look at my blood work and know, all right, I'm in good shape.
Yep.
I need to speak to somebody,
Exactly.
So I spoke with a doctor, who could go through and have a nice 30, 40-minute conversation with me and say, hey, this one, you're here on this one. This is good. This is a good sign. This one's a little high. And then he would ask some probing questions, like, how are you getting enough sleep? How's your diet been recently? Stuff like that. And you kind of work through these things and start to know a little bit. And then you hold on to this paperwork, and then you have something to reference 6 months down the line. But you need somebody like yourself, somebody that has been around the block, is highly educated in this area, so that, just going to the gym and just buying the good groceries at the grocery store doesn't necessarily always lead to optimal health. Because all of us have kind of some of these underlying genetic things, possibly, right? And so it's so valuable for people to take just some small steps to get some very important information that really can change how they feel, how they function in everyday life. And I know there's somebody out there listening right now that's like, man, that's I need to take a step. I need to do one thing this year that lets me learn a little bit more about my actual health and well-being, because I'll say one more important thing. The sooner we can take these steps in our life, I don't care if you're in your 20s, the better long-term we're going to be. Because like your friend did, you learn things about yourself early on, and when you're younger, your chances of overcoming something are just substantially greater.
Absolutely.
If you're 30 or 40 something, your chances of overcoming something that's maybe just kind of starting out is so much better than if you're 60 or 70 and now you got 20, 30 years of this thing rooted into your body that's not good. If you're able to, but I mean, and then talk about some of the obvious things that people can be doing kind of immediately to clean up their you're a functional nutritionist, right? So first of all, maybe get a little bit more clear on exactly what that is.
Sure.
In terms of your role with Will over at the Educated Dieter.
Yeah, so functional by definition, it's basically meaning that I'm looking at things comprehensively, right? So meaning that I am looking at your nutritional intervention and the approach that we're going to take there. I'm looking at your training that we're taking. So what does that exercise regimen look like? Okay, are they complementing each other? But then from a functional perspective, I'm also looking at how is stress? How are you managing stress? Are we developing some level of good morning hygiene, sleep hygiene? What are you doing to start the day? What are you doing to end the day? Because all of these things that we don't often think about that associates with health are actually leading to the same problem that we're dealing with on the fundamental foundations of your nutrition and exercise. How many times do you actually see people that are working out in the morning, or they have one really good week, but then maybe something transpired at work where they had a deadline to get to and it's required more of their effort and their mental fortitude, and then the next week it's like, training kind of didn't go so well. Okay. Mm-hmm. So we have to look at things, and what I always tell my clients is let's control the controllable. Let's not overly stress over what you can't control. There are going to be some give takes here, but let's control what we can. Okay, we have to be able to do that and not overanalyze and not overstress on the things we have zero control of. Okay, I kind of use the early part of this is talking about the perspective of importance for if you had a child, that same level of importance, right? Well, if the baby wakes up in the middle of the night at 2-3 o'clock in the morning, that's an uncontrollable. You have to get up to address that. Put the fire out the best you can, but that's just an uncontrollable situation. Okay. And so you have to kind of roll with the punches when those things are being had. Okay.
That's right.
And so that's the biggest thing when it comes to like how I typically manage my clients. I'm looking at everything from very top to bottom, and I'm looking at what can we check off, what are they doing. I'm very analytical on what they're doing, but I'm not so analytical that I'm not hearing them. Okay, I'm not so analytical that I'm overwhelming them with so many of the things, right?
Yeah.
My motto is it's good to have the tool, but only pull the tool out if it's necessary. Mm-hmm. Okay, it's better to have the tools and not need it than to need the tools and not have it. Okay, and so that's essentially how I really kind of approach my clients, right? Because if I can see they're overwhelmed, they're really stressed with so many things, and they're really talking really fast or throwing a bunch of excuses at me, I have to look and take a step back and say, okay, how can we organize and compartmentalize what they're experiencing? Let's take one thing at a time that we can actually approach, and not let's try to approach the whole picture all at once, because you're going to fail at that. You're going to try to do so many things that you're going to become mediocre at everything and not great at anything, okay, in terms of accomplishments on things. And so the first thing that people can do that are maybe listening in is take 2 to 3 things that you really want to focus on and work to improve at those every day. But don't put it as such a big goal that it's very, very hard and drastic to yourself that you're going to fail at it or you're not going to stick to it, right? Yeah. If you were used to waking up at 7 a.m., I'm not going to tell you to wake up at 4 because you can't get your work done, or 5 because you can't get your work done, okay? But you're also telling me that you only get 4 hours of sleep because then I'm just taking away from something else, okay? So we have to kind of figure out how we organize that. And so for those that are listening, even whether you're working with a coach or working by yourself and you're trying to figure this stuff out, you really have to take a step back and just restructure yourself and say, okay, what can I actually move around that's going to benefit me? What's going to put me first? Okay. And you have to have a good support system. That's very valuable too. Whether your family supports you, your significant other, whatever the case may be, they have to understand that your health is being taken seriously. Okay. And all of those things come together.
Yeah, without question. It's a huge part of your success in that journey, to whatever that goal may be, is what's your support system look like? Are these people on board with you? Are they helping to drive your success, or are they kind of pulling you out of success? So I think get very clear with people, like what you want to do, that one thing or two things, and as you're working towards that, let them know, like, this is serious, this is important, and I kind of need you on board with this. So don't be the one that's always asking me to pick up takeout food on the way home from work when I'm trying to clean up my diet. Don't be asking me to stay up late to watch a Netflix series when I'm trying to get more sleep. Just little things, like, work with me here. And listen, I am not perfect. I've had these same conversations with my wife. My wife's like, listen, I want to eat better and lose some weight, so I need you to do it too. Yeah, is what she'll tell me. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. Like, you're going to be more prone to success if I'm on board with you, because I'm automatically supporting you, because it's important for me to do it too. Yeah. And we can just kind of do it together. It's just so much easier. So anybody out there in a relationship, married or not, like, get on board with this together with your significant other, and that's going to immediately change the outcome. It will. A couple of things I just wanted to highlight that you had talked about is, like, number one, we have to give ourselves grace when we have a big goal in terms of improving our health, our nutrition, eating better, eating cleaner, skipping the crap. And listen, we're all going to screw up, and we're going to have the meal that we were starving and we didn't have a good option, so we got something, kind of quick. And then you feel bad about it, and that can spiral out of control really quick, because we start to, kind of, now we've lost faith in ourselves, right, to, like, stick to something healthy. And then we start, I might as well just, and as soon as you start to say, I might as well just, like, cut that out. Listen, we're all going to have a screw up or a bad day. It doesn't mean that the next meal or the next day can't just clean slate it and start fresh, right? Don't let it become one day becomes a week of it, becomes a month of it, because now you're just, now you're starting from zero again. Yeah, I
mean, if you had a bad day at work, doesn't mean that you don't show up the next day, right?
That's right.
It's a new day, man.
Right.
It's a
new day, man. New choices, new decisions can be made. So overcome a bad meal or a bad day of maybe lack of exercise or poor nutrition, and just get back on it the next day, and and try to limit having back-to-back. This is something I heard a while back. Limit back-to-back bad decisions or bad choices. Yeah. So if you have one, like, okay, let's get past it, and let's get a rhythm going of good ones again. And don't let the mistakes kind of happen back-to-back. Try to prevent that.
Yeah, I think goal setting is also important too, though, Chris, for those people, because I think that's what prevents that back-to-back fault, is because if people are actually setting that goal and they're looking at a longer term goal, whether that's long term is relevant, right? We can see long term for somebody that's constantly dropping off so rapidly, every week. At that point, set a goal for yourself that's a 7-day goal, right? Maybe to them that is their long term goal, to make sure that they can be consistent for 7 days. Okay, and then take that in small steps. Some of these micro steps lead to really, really big breakthroughs. And I think so many times we see people that are looking so far ahead that they don't see what's in front of them, that they just constantly they never get closer to that goal, right? They just keep looking in the horizons because they're so focused on the horizon itself, but not the little intricate steps that takes to get there.
Yeah, and those big, and it's okay to have big goals, but be really clear and very specific with how you're going to get there, have action steps, and also maybe have moments like thresholds or tiers that you're achieving as you get closer to that goal, and you can celebrate those things. Right? It's like if you're taking a long trip, a long drive, say it's a driving halfway across the country, you're not getting there in one shot. You're stopping along the way, right? And then you can look back and be like, wow, look what I just did. Look what I accomplished. Got some real things done there. And then that should help create that momentum effect, right? Of kind of continuing on that path, that journey. Is like celebrate the wins, just don't get stuck in the celebration. Like
Exactly.
still more work to do.
Fall in love with the process and not the goal.
Yes. Yeah, no, it's 100% true. And you ask any like champion type person, whether or like a Super Bowl winning football player, what's the moment he cherishes the most? Being on the stage with the confetti and holding the trophy, or the season going through all of that struggle and all of those individual moments and games? That's what they remember. That's what like is the most meaningful to those guys, was the journey, not the destination. And that's really what life is all about. That's why every day matters. And every day is a new opportunity. The other thing I love that you said was don't overcomplicate it or overwhelm yourself. Because it's just the little things that we do, the little baby step things that we're doing on a regular basis that really add up to so much. But it can be something, a good habit, something that takes 5 or 10 minutes in a day. But if you add up that 10 minutes, say it's exercise. Some people hate exercising.
Yeah.
Not me, not you, but there's people listening that's real work for them. They can actually eat pretty well, but it's exercise they hate. But if they just do 10 minutes, something like, that's pretty rigorous maybe for 10 minutes, and they fall into a good habit of maybe doing that before their day starts, before their work day, or right after their work day, that you stack those minutes on top of each other, right? Over the course of a week or a month, that's hours of activity.
Exactly.
That if you didn't find that 10 minutes, you got nothing, right? Yep. And I love that. It's so simple and still has great effectiveness. People will sometimes dismiss short workouts.
Yeah, and that's what I use. Like that's what I mean by the analogy of using like they're so far ahead and looking at the horizon, right? Because just like you said, Chris, if we break that down and we look at like 10 minutes of movement 5 days a week or 6 days a week, that equates to 1 hour a week. That essentially means 4 hours a month. That guess what? You have not been doing that before. Like that is, and the same thing like I'll use nutrition as an example, right? Let's say that we're devising a plan for someone that has very poor habits, right? So I'll use an example. Let's say it's somebody that they own their own business, right? And maybe they don't have the best of habits. They have a very, very demanding job. Maybe they have 400 employees under them, okay, that they're trying to manage, and there's maybe not the best team under them to help them. So they feel like they have to always oversee things, okay? And so they're always really kind of having to be getting a hands-on approach. And then last thing they're thinking about is themselves. And I'm using this as an example because I had someone like this that was a client. So this is actually a real life situation. And so he would only eat when he got home from work, basically. That was it. He would still try to work out. Workout was his thing that was really de-stress, like his time. But literally, he would just have like one meal a day because that was the only time he can really eat. Okay. And so sometimes it's like, okay, man, can you just carry 2 protein shakes? Like keep them in your back pocket. Like have it while you're in the middle of a meeting, something. But if you can give me 2 extra protein shakes, that's going to equate anywhere between 50 to 60 extra grams of protein that you're getting every day versus right now you're probably giving me like 60 grams of protein for the entire day. And you're a 200-pound 6'2" male, okay? And so I need something, okay? And at that point, that kind of helps me to move the needle a little bit okay, and further kind of reinforces it, okay? Let's say we have another example. Maybe it's somebody that needs to lose a significant amount of weight, right? And so if they have so much weight, but maybe their habits are like, okay, maybe they're drinking like a six pack of Coke, regular soda a day, right? And so honestly, Chris, what I do with people like that is I don't even change their food. I say, look, can we actually like either eliminate that, or can we change that to like a diet soda? Because as a byproduct of that, if I can eliminate one soda being 140 calories and you're drinking six of them a day, then as a byproduct that I'm almost getting rid of 1,000 calories a day. And I haven't even touched your food yet. I haven't even done anything with nutrition or training yet, or asking you to exercise. But if I can immediately transition that person on the very small, minuscule change possible that almost is unnoticeable to that person, then guess what? I immediately am going to develop a great relationship right out of the gate, because that person will likely lose weight pretty relatively easily before I even manage to go into anything extensive for that person. That's life changing.
That's right. If that person did just that, say, and I know that these people are out there, they will consume a beverage that's a higher calorie, typically sugar loaded, right? And if they can just replace those drinks with something healthier, that's eliminating, as you said, maybe nearly 1,000 calories a day. That's 7,000 calories a week.
Yeah.
That's 2 pounds. They could lose theoretically 8 or so pounds just because of what they removed from drinking.
Yeah. So,
ridiculous.
Yeah. So such a very impactful thing from very small, minuscule changes, you know?
Yeah.
And so, but I think a lot of people's mind is like, I've got to overhaul this because I've seen this on social media. I've seen this here. Right. And then now you're setting yourself up for failure because this is totally going to overwhelm you. You're going to last a day or two or maybe a week at most, but you're not going to retain that.
No, 180-degree changes. I mean, there are some things in our lives that we need 180-degree change on. But when we're talking about food and nutrition and long-term habits, you are not going to have success by completely derailing somebody and having them to, change everything. But if you can incorporate that what's one thing that we can replace? What's one thing that we can omit and then, replace with something healthier? And that's such a great place to start because that is what creates that cycle of positive habit forming and change and momentum and all the things that we need. Because if you're on day 2 of a new thing and you're already dreading, you're done. You've already lost. Yeah. It needs to almost feel like this is too easy is how it needs to feel, right?
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Really? Am I really going to see change from just doing this?
Yep, exactly. Doing things like that, I think, are so important for the longevity of someone's health. And, we fight the good fight, Chris. I'm sure you could agree to that because, we see so many 21-day fixes and there are such levels of extreme. And I see what that does to the culture, right? To diet culture. Because if you're telling someone they're going to lose 30 pounds or 40 pounds in 21 days, right? You're immediately getting their attention. Because those people are very vulnerable at that point, right? They feel helpless. They're like, I just need to get this weight off now. Okay. And the last thing they want to hear is like, hey, look, we're going to take this over 6 months to a year and do it the right way. They're not hearing that. Like, they're not hearing. They're hearing the 21-day, let's do this thing. Let's go as hard as we can to just get this weight off. And I'll deal with the consequences once that weight is off, right? And so oftentimes it results in 21 days, 50 pounds gained next, right? That's the next cycle of where they're at in health. And so we're trying to break that cycle, man.
Yeah. Quick question, what would be 3 no's, like 3 things real quick that come to, and it could be even exercise related, but I kind of trying to stick with the nutritional side. Sure. What are 3 things just like really need to be addressed right away? when it comes to food. And it could be timing, it could be quantity, it could be type, right? But what are three things that really come to mind that people should be thinking about?
Making sure they're eating good amounts of protein, making sure majority of their carbohydrates are coming from whole foods that have good fiber, and making sure that they're eating consistently. Meaning, if you're only eating once or twice a day, bring that to 3 meals a day. Bring it to 4 meals a day if it's manageable and practical for your life. Start small, but use those primary pillars of your nutrition to prioritize with protein, good carbohydrates that have high fiber, and work from there.
Yeah, I love that. And that I worked with William, about a year ago, and he helped me lose 25 pounds, and I really leaned out, and I was very happy, and I was tracking food and stuff, and it was so beneficial to me to learn what I was capable of doing if I just followed a system. But the number one thing that was recurring was eating enough protein. It's very hard, nearly impossible for most, to overeat protein. But it's so vital to our long-term health and success because of the way protein works in our body. And you get full on protein quick when that's your main focus. And then with that secondary thing that you mentioned with the more fibrous carbohydrates, good, healthy, complex carb that are high in fiber. And if you can do just those two things, my God, what a major difference would happen for you in the course of 60, 90 days.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly. I mean, even if the carbohydrates are coming from fruits and vegetables, I mean, you can grab a fruit with you. There's nothing that you have to refrigerate. It doesn't get easier than that. You know what I mean?
That's right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's the store-bought middle aisle stuff that is really undoes us when it comes to our nutritional health and well-being. And it's the good meats, the good protein products, and those really good fresh carbs, colorful carbs, and those types of foods that really drive our overall health and well-being. I love that. Well, dude, it's been really a pleasure. So beneficial, so helpful. I'm hopeful that the people listening will take some of this information and really walk away saying, wow, if there's just one good habit I can replace a bad habit with today, and just give it an effort, give it 30 days, give it something that's simplistic, something that's maybe it's just a high calorie hot beverage that they're getting in the mornings from the coffee place, that they can replace with something that's just just a low calorie option. That right there is simple change, but can lead to really positive results. So where can people learn more about what you're doing, Gillis, with The Educated Dieter, find your stuff and learn more, read more about you?
Yeah, so I mean, you can find us on our website, theeducateddieter.com. We also have the podcast, the Hey Coach Radio podcast that William and we always talk about a lot of these topics, and a lot of these topics are going to be more real time on the things we either talk with our own clients, or maybe it's stuff that our people are already asking us, right? And we know that a lot of people that are asking us, this is why we bring that stuff to light. Also, social media, Instagram, my Instagram handle is just my first name, Gillis331. You can always message me there. I'd be more than happy to ask questions. And of course, William's Instagram too, William Grazione. You'll be able to have, he'd be more than happy to answer questions as well.
And most of the work that you do is virtual, right? With people in a one-on-one, or do you do group format, or is it typically a one-on-one scenario?
Yeah, so with my clients I work with, it's usually a one-on-one. I'll do monthly calls with my clients as I'm working with them throughout the week on their health goals. And I also do some mentorship stuff too with other coaches too. So I wear a couple different hats, Chris. So,
Right.
just helping them navigate that stuff, right? Just because clients get very overwhelmed, so do we as coaches, especially for some of the coaches that are out there that might be from year 1 and 3 of their career. And there maybe is a pressure of clients that are, because for us in terms of coaches, we get a lot of clients that are begging us to go into, I want to lose weight, I want to be in a fat loss. And I know that William talks a lot about this, but we have to give people what they need and not always what they want. And sometimes that's a hard conversation. And sometimes for us as coaches, we can feel pressured by putting someone in a fat loss when they shouldn't, okay, for the sake of keeping that client. And so a lot of times I help other coaches in my what I mentor them in terms of like, you got to stay the course and you just have to continue educating them to understand that, you're in it for the long haul to see them actually improve their quality of life, not just for the shortcomings of things.
That's right. Yeah, it's like the Mr. Miyagi approach, right? Ralph Macchio just wanted to learn karate. And he's like, why am I'm coming here every day and I'm
why am I washing your cars?
I'm painting the fence, I'm washing your cars. What the hell? What's going on around here?
Yeah.
And then Mr. Miyagi's like, all right, sit on the floor. And then he starts throwing punches at him. He's like, oh my gosh. And then I love, that's like the best. I love old school 80s movies, but that moment in the movie solidified, like, this guy's genius.
Yeah.
This guy just taught this young boy so much in this moment. And he just blew his mind. That he just worked all those muscles and all those patterns perfectly for you and set you up for success. And that's what you're trying to do with people. It's like, I got to give you what you need, not necessarily what you want. So eventually we can get to what you want.
And that's what, what William and I really kind of recognize, right? We're I wouldn't say a two-man team. There's other coaches that have with us. But, when we put our minds together, that's why we've kind of developed kind of working with other coaches, because we want to I can help more people by having other coaches that also have their own impact on their own clients. And I get much bigger reach in terms of just helping the industry as a whole. I don't care about taking ownership of like the credit of helping that person. To me, it's more of a passion to be able to have another coach come to me and say, hey, because you talked me through this and I navigated, my client actually got results. And, to me, that's really what brings me purpose, man, to be honest with you, is to be able to see that both as like I do that for my clients, but also doing that for other coaches, to be able to see that. That just brings me joy to see that kind of stuff. Yeah.
And one kind word I'll share about Gillis is, I have a friend of mine I've been friends with for years. Her name is Candace, and she speaks very highly of our guest today. I've known her for years. She's been working with you for, I think, over a year.
Over a year, yeah. We're probably approaching closer to 2 at this point. Yeah.
Yeah, and she has nothing but positive, great things to say about you and the work that you do. So that's just an extra pat on your back.
Man, I appreciate that.
Yeah, and thank you so much for taking the time today to share your wisdom with our audience. I know people benefited greatly from it.
Awesome. I appreciate that, Chris.
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Remember, listeners, you are strong by design. You are given an opportunity every day to make those choices, to move the needle in your life, to live a life that is truly strong by design. We thank you so much. Here's to a great 2023. Thanks again for being part of our listenership here on Strong by Design. We hope you come back for more great episodes this year. God bless you. Talk with you next week.